After learning about my wife's affair, I felt an overwhelming need to escape to the hills, seeking solitude and clarity. The events that unfolded had left me reeling, and while I don't know exactly why I feel compelled to write this, perhaps sharing my story could help someone else who might be going through a similar situation. In February 2018, I made the heartbreaking discovery of my wife's unfaithfulness after we had been married for 3.5 years. At the time, I was working a contract job that required a lot of travel. This job allowed me to work from home when I was back, which I appreciated, but it also meant I was away for extended periods. My wife held a prestigious position as a director at a technical sales firm, earning a very good salary. For the most part, I thought we had a strong marriage, although the strain of my frequent absences was starting to show. I first met my wife 5 years ago at a friend's barbecue. From the moment we struck up a conversation, there was an undeniable chemistry between us. I felt incredibly lucky to be with such a beautiful and articulate woman who seemed genuinely interested in me, despite my rough persona. Our relationship quickly blossomed, and after about 18 months of dating, we got married and moved into a large apartment while we planned to buy a house. However, as we reached the 3-year mark in our marriage, things began to shift. My feelings for her remained strong, but I noticed a change in her behavior. She started picking fights about little things, and when I tried to discuss my long work hours and the frequency of my trips, she would respond with anger rather than understanding. She often argued that I had no right to question her actions since I was away so much myself. I tried to reassure her that I could cut back on my travel, but the argument seemed to go nowhere. Looking back now, I had no clue that she was in the middle of an affair. The signs were subtle: her late nights at work and our dwindling intimacy started to build doubt in my mind. Initially, I dismissed it all as her being worn out from work. But my self-esteem took a hit when she often turned me down for intimacy, and I should have recognized the warning signs. In September 2017, I began to notice an alarming trend. Kathy would come home from work and then leave for evening work events. What started as 1 night a week soon escalated to 3 or more nights. While I did not consider myself a jealous person, I was aware that she worked in an environment where there were many men, and I couldn't help but wonder what was really going on. One pivotal moment occurred a month before everything unraveled. On this day, Kathy stopped at a store before coming home, and as I helped her with the groceries, I noticed something unusual. While reaching into the back seat of her car to grab a couple of bags, I spotted a pink item glimmering just under the front passenger seat. As I leaned down, I realized it was one of my wife's bras, a style I recognized because she often bought from a specific store. At that moment, I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach. I couldn't comprehend how her bra ended up under the car seat. I chose to leave it there, feeling sick to my stomach, my heart racing. When I returned to the kitchen, Kathy noticed my odd behavior and remarked that I looked like I had seen a ghost. I brushed off her comment, desperately trying not to let my anger or suspicion show. The weight of uncertainty and betrayal loomed over me, signaling that my life was about to change drastically. I made every effort to mask the anger and betrayal I felt inside, but that evening, it took everything I had to keep my true emotions hidden. The next day, I resolved to find out whether she was involved with someone else. I started sifting through my mind for the clues I might have overlooked. The only tangible piece of evidence I had was the bra, but it wasn't enough to draw any conclusions. Our city is quite expansive, and she works in a building downtown, which made it easier for her to maintain secrecy. For a while, I decided to divert my thoughts away from the idea of an affair and instead focus on giving her more attention, hoping it might improve our situation. One Friday evening, after a long week at work, I decided to create a special dinner. I set the dining table beautifully with elegant plates, shiny silverware, and flickering candles. I even picked up a nice bottle of wine and a fresh bouquet of roses to add a romantic touch. When she walked in that evening, her usual energy lit up the room. I proudly showed her the dinner I had prepared, but instead of the excitement I anticipated, she just offered a sad smile. She apologized and explained that she had plans to meet her co-workers at a local bar. She suggested that she could quickly grab a bite to eat with me before leaving, but needed to take a shower first. In that moment, I felt a surge of emotions, my insides twisted with disappointment, and I went completely silent. The rage that bubbled up inside me was intense, and I knew I had hit my limit. While she was in the shower, I grabbed my company cell phone and discreetly placed it in her back seat. This had been on my mind as a way to track her location using my personal phone. I then returned to the kitchen and threw the meal and flowers into the trash, feeling defeated. When she returned, dressed up and looking fantastic, she cheerfully asked if we could eat. I told her to forget it and go out with her friends instead. She looked at me with confusion and asked if I was angry. I replied that I was simply disappointed because she never wanted to spend time together. That seemed to ignite a fire in her. She snapped at me to stop acting childish and made some snarky comment about my short temper. As her words echoed in my ears, I processed the situation. Foolishly, I had expected that she would want to enjoy the evening with me. She smirked, shook her head, and stormed out. Once she was gone, I pulled out my other phone and began tracking my work phone. My heart raced as I saw her stop at a bar about 20 minutes away, a place I knew she frequented with her co-workers. Fueled by a mix of anxiety and anger, I decided to follow her. I parked across the street from the bar and sat in my car, feeling like a stalker but convincing myself that I needed to know where she was. About an hour later, I spotted her emerging from the bar with a man who looked like one of the executives from her office. To my horror, he pulled her close and kissed her passionately. My stomach twisted into knots, and I felt my body go numb as they made their way to another car and drove off together. I followed them, heart pounding, as their car took me to a hotel about 10 minutes away. I parked on a nearby street, watching as they held hands while entering the hotel. At that moment, I realized I had seen enough. The feelings of betrayal washed over me, and I pounded my fists on the steering wheel in frustration. Something snapped inside me. I wasn't sure if I blacked out or simply lost track of my thoughts. When I regained my focus, I felt an overwhelming urge for a drink. This moment marked a turning point in my life, one I could never have anticipated. I began driving aimlessly, replaying the shocking events in my mind while overwhelmed with rage and sadness. I headed out toward the outskirts of town, about 30 miles away, until I found a small bar and decided to pull in. I found a seat at the bar and ordered a drink. I must have appeared devastated because the female bartender commented that I looked like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I managed a weak smile and replied, "You could say that." Soon after, a man took a seat next to me and struck up a conversation. I wasn't really in the mood to talk, but there was something about him that made me feel at ease. We chatted for a while, and eventually, I found myself sharing the painful details of my wife's betrayal and how I just wanted to leave her behind. He looked at me earnestly and patted me on the back, saying, "Buddy, you are not alone in this. You are not alone." This realization hit me a few years ago when I was going through one of the toughest times in my life. I truly believe that sometimes the challenges we face occur for a reason, and this experience taught me that my life could change significantly. At that moment, the choice was entirely in my hands. My future could improve or get worse, depending on how I decided to respond. Something about the words spoken to me by a man named Ray shook me out of a dark cloud that had been hanging over me. Even though I was in pain, I usually approached life with a logical mindset, and Ray's perspective made perfect sense. We had just met each other, but he felt like a kindred spirit. Ray was a down-to-earth guy, the kind of person you might picture wearing cowboy boots and a hat, someone who carries a sense of wisdom about him that I appreciated. During our conversation, Ray asked me when I planned to move out of my current situation, and his question caught me off guard. I hadn't even considered that I might need to look ahead in my life. I knew I didn't want to be around my wife any longer, and I was filled with a strong sense of urgency, a fight-or-flight response coursing through me. Ray then expressed his sympathy for what I was going through and offered a possible solution. He mentioned that he had a travel trailer parked on his property. The trailer wasn't in perfect condition, but he thought it might serve as a temporary escape for me if I ever felt the need to leave. He encouraged me to come by and take a look at the trailer and see if I could envision myself living there, even just for a while. He offered a great price and mentioned that I could park it on a nice piece of land he had. The idea was intriguing. It felt like a chance to break free from my current circumstances. It took me a moment to digest Ray's suggestion, and during that time, the bartender, who had been listening to us, chimed in. She smiled and added that if she had the chance to escape from her chaotic past, she would have jumped at the opportunity to live in a trailer or anywhere that would help her find peace of mind. In that moment, it felt like I had stumbled into something surreal, almost like a scene from a Twilight Zone episode. Yet, perhaps this was exactly what I needed. I told Ray that I would think about his offer and would come out to check out the trailer soon. After wrapping up our conversation, we parted ways, but I felt a flicker of hope. I had gained a new perspective and a potential pathway to escape what I believed to be a nightmare filled with deep heartache. One thing was clear in my mind: I would never again want to be with my wife. Cheating was an unforgivable act for me, something I had always vowed to never tolerate. When I returned home that night after seeing Kathy, I settled onto the couch, lost in thought. Kathy soon emerged and asked where I had been. I turned the question back on her, asking where she had gone. She replied casually, saying she had gone to grab drinks. In that moment, I confronted her directly, asking if she was having an affair. She appeared taken aback, but quickly regained her composure to deny it, asking why I would even think that. I revealed to her that I had heard rumors about her involvement with someone at work. When she asked who had told me, I chose not to reveal the name, simply saying it was someone I knew. Her response was dismissive, claiming I was being ridiculous, that I was drunk and imagining things. She then asked again where I had been, and I told her I had been out at a bar with some friends. Kathy stared at me as if she wanted to ask more, but instead, she just turned and walked back to our bedroom, leaving me sitting there. I decided to sleep on the couch that night, fully realizing that she had been deceiving me for months. Sleep didn't come to me, my mind was consumed by painful images of her with someone else. I felt hurt and disgusted, drowning in self-pity. However, as I laid there, my thoughts turned to Ray's trailer. The idea began to feel like a light in my darkness, almost like a potential solution to my problems. I realized I was instinctively ready to escape my nightmare. The idea of flight became my priority. The next morning, we went about our lives as if nothing had happened, the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. A few days later, I met with Ray at his ranch. He owned a beautiful piece of property, and to my surprise, the trailer was much better than I had imagined. It was well equipped with all the necessities for living. The experience reminded me of spring break spent traveling with friends back in college, and those memories brought a smile to my face. I made Ray an offer on the trailer, and he readily agreed to the price. It felt like I was making a deal I couldn't pass up. He even provided me with directions to his ranch, and as I drove away, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination to take control of my life. Ray provided me with clear directions to his ranch property, and I decided to take a drive over to see it for myself. Upon arrival, I was struck by the beauty of the landscape. The property was lush and vibrant, filled with tall trees and patches of scrub brush that added to its natural charm. As I explored, I noticed there seemed to be hiking and biking trails nearby, which hinted at the outdoor adventures waiting to be discovered. The ranch is situated close to the foothills of some impressive mountains, adding a breathtaking backdrop to the scene. Ray has a small shack located on a hill that overlooks the entire property, giving a perfect view of the surroundings. I learned that there is water and electricity available for a trailer, making it a practical place for me to stay. Ray offered to pull the travel trailer to the side and set it up for me, which made me feel welcomed. Over the next few weeks, I tried to get Kathy to be honest with me about what was really going on between us. However, all I received in return was gaslighting. I even confronted her directly, telling her that if I found out she was cheating on me, there would be no turning back for our relationship. Instead of bringing her to honesty, my words seemed to push her further into her deceptive haze, leading to her denying everything with such intensity that it almost made me laugh. The denial from her was so extreme that it added to my frustration. I found myself regretting that I hadn't taken some photos of her with the other person, which might have served as proof of her betrayal. As I endured this mental torture, I reached a clear conclusion: I wanted out of this marriage. I chose not to express my feelings to Kathy anymore, believing it was better to take action. I began making plans to leave. While Kathy was at work, I started to quietly gather my belongings from the apartment and move them to the trailer. This gave me a sense of purpose and control in an otherwise chaotic situation. During this time, I noticed a change in Kathy's behavior. She started to act more kindly toward me. However, in my mind, it was too little and too late. I saw her continuing with her after-work outings, leading me to believe that nothing had really changed for her. Feeling the need for a break myself, I decided to take action. One evening, as she prepared to go out, I also got dressed, and when she asked me where I was headed, I replied that I was meeting some friends. When she probed for more details, I simply told her that she wouldn't know them and that she wouldn't enjoy the conversation. This was similar to the response she would give me whenever I asked to join her on one of her work outings. She looked somewhat hurt but accepted my answer and wished me a good time. I assured her that I would have fun. Between focusing on the trailer and meeting Ray at the bar, I began to form new friendships. Ray's friends and family welcomed me, leading to enjoyable times and new connections. I made a conscious decision to moderate my drinking during this period, knowing how easy it could be to slip into unhealthy habits while feeling sorry for myself. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Kathy informed me that she had to go on a work trip the following week. I asked her who else was going, and she mentioned the executive team and several department heads. Without thinking, I told her I hoped she had a great time with her boyfriend. Immediately regretting my words, I realized it led to a lot of arguing between us. In many ways, I wished I had more knowledge about the other man involved, but Ray reminded me that, ultimately, it didn't matter who he was. What mattered was that Kathy had chosen to cheat on me. She had essentially destroyed our marriage, and whether she accepted that fact or kept denying it was irrelevant. I appreciated Ray's tough yet insightful perspective on my situation. He should consider documenting this wisdom, as it could certainly help others dealing with betrayal. Kathy's work trip brought me an unexpected opportunity to finalize my plans. Once she left, I took the chance to gather the last of my belongings. I loaded up my vehicle with items of value, leaving behind any furniture or items tied to our shared life, focusing on clothes, computers, and essential equipment. Before I left, I wrote a note for Kathy, intending to explain my feelings. However, after rereading it, I decided to keep it simple. I grabbed a piece of paper and wrote, "I hope it was worth it," and placed it alongside my wedding ring on the kitchen table. The moment I did so, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. I finally felt free. No longer did I have to hide the truth. I knew there would be emotional baggage to carry, but I was ready to heal. What I needed now was space and distance from her, to remove her from my life as quickly and quietly as possible. I wasn't proud of the fact that I never confronted her more forcefully or pulled a confession from her. I never yelled, screamed, or cursed her for her betrayal. But in my heart, I had decided that she simply didn't deserve me anymore. She had disrespected everything we had built together. She showed a complete lack of respect for everything we had built together. All our dreams for the future are now nothing but memories. We had been saving to buy a house and were excited about starting a family one day. Now, all those hopes feel shattered, and there's no chance to go back to how things were. I don't owe her anything at this point. She can handle the fallout from her actions. I never had any hidden plans or agendas. I didn't even reach out to a lawyer. All I wanted was some clarity on what had happened. I found some comfort in my new trailer, nestled in the mountains, and the fresh, crisp air was just what I needed during that tough time. The week after all of this happened, I picked up running again, and I felt an incredible sense of aliveness that hadn't been there before. While she was away, I chose not to respond to any of Kathy's messages. They didn't require a reply. Most of her texts were just updates like, "We just landed," or "We're having a team dinner." She did send a few messages asking where I was or urging me to reach out, but I felt no urge to respond. The day Kathy returned home, my phone was bombarded with messages from her. She texted me non-stop and called repeatedly. After the first day, her mother even tried to reach me. My father is the only family member I have left, and since we aren't close, she didn't involve him. I ignored the first few messages where she was crying. I didn't bother to listen to any of her voicemails after that. Her text messages read things like, "What is this? We need to talk, and I don't know what you think you know, but there is nothing going on. I'm not involved with anyone. I'm not having an affair." After a week of silence from me, she finally sent a message acknowledging that things had gotten out of hand. She confessed that she had been involved with someone at work but insisted it meant nothing. She claimed she got caught up in her job while I was away and made a mistake, saying she intended to end it. That confession, which I had anticipated, only fueled my dislike for her further. I wondered why she couldn't have been truthful from the beginning. This was not the woman I had envisioned sharing my life with, and I knew that mistakes like hers shouldn't last for months on end. Her pleas for me to return and work on our marriage became desperate and, honestly, a bit pathetic. After some time, she stopped trying to contact me for a couple of weeks. I continued to ignore her. I didn't want her to intrude on the new life I was beginning to build for myself. One day, however, her tone shifted to anger in her messages. She called me a coward for not talking to her and expressed how much she missed me. She sent messages begging me to come home so we could have a conversation about our situation. I couldn't recall every message, but they all felt like excuses rather than real apologies. Eventually, I grew tired of it all and decided to change my cell phone number. In June 2018, I received an email from Kathy stating she had hired a lawyer and was filing for divorce. My response was simply, "Okay, sounds good." This led to a flurry of frantic emails from her, demanding that I come see her. However, she soon realized that her tactics weren't effective. After some time, she wrote that if I agreed to an uncontested divorce, she wouldn't bother me anymore. I agreed, and several months later, I finally felt the weight lift off my shoulders. I was free, and I didn't have to see her again after I left our apartment. There was no closure for either of us, but it seemed like that mattered more to her than to me. For a few months, she would occasionally cross my mind, and the pain would unexpectedly return, especially when I heard a song that brought back memories of our time together. But over time, those thoughts faded away. Now, I am officially divorced, and life is genuinely good. I recently met a wonderful girl while out for a run on the trail near my home. I helped her change a flat tire, and we hit it off immediately. She's not only amazing but also very attractive, even though she is a few years younger than me. She appreciates my mountain lifestyle and affectionately calls me her mountain man. I'm in no rush to become serious again, but I don't plan to give up on dating entirely. I still enjoy living in the trailer, and I have no plans to change that anytime soon. My life has become much simpler, and the time spent outdoors has been instrumental in helping me heal from the heartache of my past marriage. I understand that everyone copes in their own way, and this is how I've chosen to move forward. I understand that everyone reacts to situations like this in their own way. Personally, I was fortunate not to have children at the time and was only in my 3rd year of marriage. Because of my circumstances, I made decisions that felt right for me. It's important to realize that you don't have to stay in a relationship with someone who has betrayed you. If you find yourself in a situation like this, try not to dwell on the pain. Focus on moving forward with your life. Things do improve after you invest time in healing and personal growth. I genuinely wish everyone the best life they can have. I wanted to provide an update about my situation with my ex-wife. I've rewritten this multiple times to make it clearer. In my previous post, I expressed concern that my ex-wife was trying to find me, possibly hoping to reconcile. I had moved about 2 hours away from where we previously lived. Just last weekend, I saw her at a coffee shop I regularly visit in my new town. I felt uneasy, suspecting that her presence there was not just a coincidence. Fortunately, I managed to leave before she noticed me. This past weekend, I returned to town to pick up some groceries and decided to stop by my favorite coffee shop to work on some documents for my job. While I was finishing up, I left the shop and started walking toward my truck. Suddenly, I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Kathy, my ex-wife, waving at me from across the street. It felt surreal, like the moment I had been dreading had finally arrived. I stood there frozen for a moment, and when she ran across the street to reach me, she extended her arms for a hug. Out of instinct, I held my hands up, palms facing her to signal my discomfort. She paused and looked at me with a mixture of hurt and confusion. Then she said, "Paul, I've been looking for you. I heard you moved out here and wanted to see you. Can we talk?" At that moment, I felt like a trapped animal. Despite my initial hesitation, I agreed to find a nearby table where we could talk for a short while. She suggested going to my place, but I firmly declined. Instead, I led her to a bench outside a small shop at the end of the block. She began by commenting on how much I had changed, mentioning how she liked my new appearance, my beard, and my fit physique. She was trying to flatter me, and I noticed she looked very attractive, wearing little white shorts and a tank top. Her hair was in a ponytail, styled in a way I had always liked. My instincts were on high alert, as I sensed that she was trying to turn on the charm. I had to remind myself to stay focused and pay attention to where this conversation was headed. Kathy then began apologizing for her actions during our marriage. She mentioned that karma had hit her hard after I left. Her workplace found out about the affair, which led to significant consequences for her and her affair partner, who happened to have a fiancé. He blamed her for the trouble it caused in his life. In retaliation, she exposed their affair to his fiancé, which ended that relationship. As she spoke, I noticed tears forming in her eyes. I remained silent, looking around without having much to say. After a moment, she looked at me directly and expressed her feelings. Kathy explained that she never meant to enter into an affair. She felt caught up in the company environment and believed that her affair partner had manipulated her with his charm and influence. She admitted that she thought she was using him, just as he was using her. She intended to come clean to me before I left, but during that period, she struggled with guilt and turned to drinking to cope. Once I was out of her life, she felt foolish and lonely, as if her heart had shattered from the loss. She ended the affair immediately after I left. Since I had not reached out to her or tried to talk, she felt compelled to find me, hoping to make amends and start anew. She recognized that we were divorced but wanted to see if we could wipe the slate clean. As she spoke, I just stared at her in disbelief. Summarizing her words, I finally let her know how I felt. I couldn't hold back my anger and frustration. "How dare you? How dare you think you can come here and just erase all the hurt you caused? Do you honestly believe that I can forgive everything you did to ruin our marriage? I've made it clear before, if you cheated on me, our relationship would be over. There is no forgiveness for that betrayal, there is no chance to reboot what we once had. You ended it the moment you decided to step out on me. How foolish do you think I am? I followed you one night and witnessed you going into a hotel with someone else. I was so upset that I didn't even notice my own voice rising, and people around us started to take notice of my distress." As she began to sob, she reached for my arm, and I allowed her to lean against me for a moment, letting her cry on my shoulder before gently nudging her away. When she looked up at me, she spoke with a mixture of sorrow and desperation. "I deserve this, I know I do. Can we at least go to dinner or something? I don't want to leave, I need to talk." I want to ensure that we lay everything out in the open. I didn't get the time with you before that I so desperately need now. Please, Paul, I know you may not want to hear this, but I love you more than I realized until you left me. I broke you just as you broke me, and I can't forgive myself for it. I don't want to forgive myself, not ever. Her breathing became frantic, and she began to hyperventilate while crying. I pulled her close and hugged her tightly, feeling as if that was the only way to calm her in that moment. It hit me then, I had indeed broken her heart just as she had shattered mine. We began to walk together, and I found a quieter path where things settled down a bit. I then decided to ask her how she managed to find me, curious if she had hired a private investigator. She chuckled softly and said no, though she had considered it. A couple of weeks ago, she had run into Stacy, who let slip that she had seen me. Kathy pressed her for every little detail, even though Stacy had been reluctant to share because I had asked her not to. However, Kathy wouldn't let her be until she divulged everything she knew, which was just that I was back in town and living somewhere nearby. She blushed as she recounted the story, and I let out a chuckle, thinking about how Stacy simply could not keep her mouth shut. Eventually, we went to dinner at a quaint little restaurant with a patio. I ensured we kept it alcohol-free. I didn't want her to have any excuse to soften my stance. Surprisingly, our conversation was good. After dinner, I walked her to her car, but she was not ready to give up. She pressed me hard, insisting that she hadn't been with anyone else since I left. She declared that I was the only one she wanted. I firmly told her that it was still far too soon to entertain any notions of rekindling our relationship. She begged to see me again, but I remained non-committal. I did give her my new email address, but that was the extent of my openness. When she asked for my phone number, I refused, explaining that she would flood it with texts and calls. Tears filled her eyes at that response, and she mentioned she would be back in town next weekend if I was interested. I chose not to reply. Before she left, she assured me she would email me with all the details of her plans. I then asked her directly how she would feel if the roles were reversed and I had cheated. She paused for a moment, then said that, yes, she would eventually forgive me, but only if we went to marriage counseling or worked through the healing process with open communication and perhaps even a binding agreement. I replied that maybe I could consider it in 5 or 10 years down the line. Surprisingly, without hesitation, she declared that if that was what it would take, she would wait. She took my hands in hers, looked me straight in the eye, and said something that took me off guard. God damn it, Paul, I will always love you, and I will do anything to prove it. After she left, I was left in a state of shock. Her words echoed in my mind, filled with such conviction, yet I still struggled to envision a future with her. Right now, I found it hard to see her as anything more than a friend with benefits, perhaps just a friend. I am uncertain if we could ever truly find our way back together again. Do not label me as a fool for feeling this way. I might seem naive for thinking this way, but I believe that second chances are hard to come by. After all the ups and downs in my life, I went home feeling a mix of emotions. I decided to go for a long run to clear my head, and I enjoyed a few beers afterward. By the time I finished, I felt like I was in a good place. However, there's still that nagging thought in the back of my mind. Can anyone assure me that she wouldn't mess with my newfound sense of peace? Honestly, I'm not sure. Everything is still too fresh, too raw. The memories and feelings come rushing back, making it hard to think clearly. But I do have the luxury of time on my side. I can take a step back to sort through my thoughts and find some perspective. This will likely be my last update about all of this. I posted my story on Reddit, but the moderators kept removing it for some reason. To briefly recap the situation, my ex-wife managed to track me down after a year of not hearing from me. We had a conversation, and it was clear that she wanted to reconcile and restart our life together. Many people predicted that I would fall back into her arms like a fool, but those expectations will be proven wrong. This past week, she sent me a long email expressing her love and regret over the affair. She wanted to come back into my life and spend the weekend together. But I made it clear that I was shutting that down. At this moment, I am perfectly happy being alone. I enjoy living my life without complicating it further. Being in a remote location has allowed me to find clarity, and I appreciate the company of friends and a few women I've met along the way. At 32 years old, I feel no rush to change my life. I have my own plans and goals, and for now, I intend to stick with them. In my response to her email, I told her I wouldn't give her my new phone number. I made it very clear that I have no intention of reconciling. She made her choices, and I can no longer trust her. We are not the same people we once were, and while I wish her well, I do not see her as someone I want back in my life. Maybe in the future, if circumstances align, we could be friends, but that is uncertain. Her reaction was quite telling. She expressed disappointment, of course. But she also informed me of her new job offer several states away, which changed everything. She revealed that she had hoped I would consider moving with her since my work can be done remotely. Her plan was for us to start fresh in a new place. But fortunately for me, I have to leave for business for a week. This timing works in my favor because it gives me a break from her. I imagine she will send a few more emails for a while, but eventually, she will come to grips with the fact that our time together has come to an end. Perhaps she will find someone else, and who knows what will happen next for her. I just wanted to share this update. It feels important to let go of old burdens and focus on living life to the fullest. Wishing everyone the best as they navigate their own paths.